It's the one-year anniversary of Unite the Right in Charlottesville. And Jason Kessler, the organizer, is holding Unite the Right 2 in Washington, D.C. as I'm filming this. But guess what? Apparently, I'm not there. You can tell I'm at home. A lot of people are tweeting there's barely anyone down there. I saw a tweet from Cassandra Fairbanks. She said it was like 5 people. 5 people came for Unite the Right. Yeah, because nobody wants to go to that. Very few people knew what the original was. I'm sorry. I was misspeaking. There were people who didn't know what what the Unite the Right was going to be in the first place. A lot of people who showed up with nationalist, white nationalist, and white supremacist imagery knew what they were doing, but there were people who had no idea what they were getting into. In this instance, following what happened last year, yeah, people don't want to go. But unsurprisingly, there's a ton of police in Charlottesville, and there's a ton of police in D.C. because everybody was very critical of what happened last year because you basically had 2 factions fighting each other, so somehow that was the police's fault. Now you've got people saying that, because Jason Kessler's group is like literally 5 people or whatever, I don't know how many is there, but it's a relatively small amount, like literally not even a group. You've got people saying that the white supremacists did show up, they're wearing the badges. The other day we saw a scuffle between protesters and police. It was a de-arrest. They were yelling puppy pile or something, like dog pile. And then they all started, they were dragging a cop around and trying to pull someone off him. So we have this tweet that I saw from the Washington Post. Confusion over an enormous police presence turned into anger Saturday night in Charlottesville as hundreds of protesters marched through the streets, growing angry at police and calling for an end to white supremacy. They weren't growing angry with police. They are angry with police. Right? They were chanting that all cops are racists. They yell ACAB, okay? ACAB, and that means all cops are bastards. They yell this. So these people don't like police. They've called the police fascist, white supremacists. They're not growing angry with them. They already are. It's not surprising. Look, in Boston last year, when they had that free speech rally with like Vashiva, the Indian guy, and everyone said it was white supremacists, what happened? Well, very few people showed up to the gazebo to have their free speech event. It was probably a couple dozen. But you had 40,000 people coming out to oppose fascism, not even knowing what was going on, and Antifa ended up fighting with police. Yesterday, there were no white supremacists, there were not even conservatives for the most part who were down there, and they still ended up fighting with police. And now, you've got Washington Post putting out the story saying that there's confusion over the police presence. What confusion? We all know what happened last year. It was totally fucked up. And so the police came out now to make sure it doesn't happen again, and they're mad at the police, and now they're calling the police the fascists. It seems like no matter what happens, even if conservatives don't show up, they're going to fight with the cops. That's how it goes. So they've got some other tweets here. They say protesters gathered there where a year ago, white supremacists had shouted anti-Semitic slogans and carried torches and chanted slogans against the police, against white supremacy, and the University of Virginia. You can see in the front of the march, you've got the anarchist flag. Many protesters called the police's actions on Saturday a provocation, another symbol of the over-policing of America, and started chanting at the officers who were holding shields and wearing helmets. Okay, the police are holding shields and wearing helmets because of what happened last year. We can safely say that. So let's look at the actual story here. Anti-racist protesters and activists marched through the streets of Charlottesville. If you watched my main channel video, I basically talked about the attacks on the press, how a lot of the rhetoric coming from CNN is really one-sided, blames Trump, when in reality, no, I don't believe a Trump supporter has attacked a journalist. There may have been one story, I could be wrong. But I digress. The point I should say is that I focus on on-the-ground stuff, and I know for a fact that Antifa regularly attacks the press. It's like a long-standing tradition. And if there has been anything that's been like a Trump supporter, I think the worst thing I've heard is Jim Acosta getting, he got flicked off. And then in terms of threats, we had that guy call C-SPAN and say that he would, he wanted to harm Brian Stelter and Don Lemon. But, the other day in Charlottesville, we had NBC crews actually attacked. So let's read through a little bit of this. I want to show you exactly why the police were there, all right? Charlottesville, confusion over an extraordinary police presence on the anniversary of a violent and deadly white nationalist rally turned into anger. Saturday night, as hundreds of black-clad protesters marched through the streets surrounding the University of Virginia here, screaming at police and calling for an end to white supremacy. Black-clad. They're referring to a black bloc? Maybe, maybe not. Typically, like what we saw in Berkeley last year, the black bloc people smashed windows, Antifa. They threw Molotov cocktail. I don't know if they had Molotov cocktails. I think they did, but I knew they started fires. And someone spray-painted liberals get the bullet too. So yes, destruction, vandalism. And these are the people who are out there now. So you want to know why the cops are out there? Yeah, because there's violent groups that show up. I wonder if, the police will bring this up and say, we recognize that anyone can be violent, and that right now you had a news crew attacked. Where's the media coverage? Right? They want to talk about the violent white supremacists, and hands down, they took the cake last year when dude ran people over and killed that poor woman. But it's not like Antifa isn't violent. It's not a game, right? People get mad. They play this whataboutism. You can think the white nationalists are awful, and you can think Antifa is awful too. They're both allowed to be awful. When I talk about Antifa, it's because they regularly do this, okay? Charlottesville, I made like 3 videos about it, and people are like, Tim, why aren't you talking about these people? I'm like, dude, I made 3 videos about it, like back to back to back. And then Antifa comes out when there's no white supremacists. It's like just Antifa, and they still fight the cops because now the cops are the white supremacists. So they said, oh, here you go. Last year they came with torches, said a large banner in front of a monument of Thomas Jefferson. This year they come with badges. And there you have it. There is literally nothing you can do. These people want to target. It's the system. It's the police. It's white supremacists. It's fascists. They're all the same thing. It's what they were saying in Portland. When the police, cleared out Antifa, they said, oh, the police are fascists, so they're protecting fascists. It's like, no, they ordered you to disperse, and you didn't. They ordered the Patriot Prayer side to go into the park, which they didn't at first, but then they eventually did go in the park, and then the police started to back off. But Antifa was in the middle of the road, right? So it is what it is. I think the police are going to be biased for one simple reason. When you look at Patriot Prayer in Portland, they're actually saying things nice to the police. And in most of the events that I've been to where it's been, right-wingers versus the left, the right-wing people are apologetic and cooperative with police. They fly the Blue Lives Matter flag. So let me ask you a question. A cop comes out, has no idea what the hell's going on. He's been briefed, there's going to be a big protest and it could get violent, and we got to make sure the two sides stay away from each other. He looks to his right, and there's a guy waving a flag that says Blue Lives Matter. And the guy looks at that cop and says, thank you, officer. He looks to his left, and there are people screaming, all cops are racist and all cops are bastard. What do you think the police are going to do? Is it right that the police are biased? No, but they're human beings. And if you don't treat them with respect, they're not going to treat you with respect. There are a lot of instances where the police are heavy-handed. A guy got shot in the head with some kind of projectile, and it cracked through his helmet. Probably would have killed him if he wasn't wearing his helmet. That's messed up, man. It is. The police shouldn't be biased, and the police should be trained to deal with people screaming in their faces, and a lot of them are. The department's trained for that, the rioters screaming, threatening you. But let's break it down. It's a long, hard day at work. You don't know why they're protesting. You don't pay attention to this stuff. You don't care about what they're protesting about. Most people just want to watch Game of Thrones. They want to put on the BBC and watch the X-Files marathon that's been going on that I want to get back to. I don't want to sit here and hear someone scream in my face. So there's a lot of things about police institutions that I think need to be reformed, about prisons that need to be reformed. But I don't think you get there by walking up to a cop and screaming in his face. And that's why I believe it's very likely that when you see these events, the police are going to turn to the left. Because when the police, like in Boston, said to the right, hey, you guys need to clear out, they were like, no problem, officer, thank you very much, and immediately just carried on. It's not just about the fact that they like cops. It's that the right wants to prove a point about respecting police orders and trying to maintain peace. And the left is challenging the police. And thus, there you go. I don't think the police are openly straight up being like, yeah, we like the right. In the sense that as a police force, they're biased. But I believe when you take into account all the individual officers walking into the situation and seeing people say thank you and the other people saying fuck you, they're going to be like, yeah, we don't like those guys. Those guys are all right. It can go both ways for sure. But come on, what do you think is going to happen? So I'm not going to read entire. I wanted to show that bit right there. But here's what I really want to show. Brass knuckles, prohibited items seized in Charlottesville. There was some. I'm not going to call them out, but somebody tweeted very fine people and linked this article, and it was a lefty journalist. And my assumption is that they're making, obviously it's a reference to Donald Trump, where last year he said there were very fine people there. And I think what they were trying to insinuate was that this was the fascists. This was white nationalists, Jason Kessler's people bringing weapons. No, this was Antifa. Antifa were the ones bringing brass knuckles, knives. Someone brought a face shaver and I can't imagine that the vice grips were intended to be used as a weapon or the face shaver. Like, these look like just someone bringing tools, but brass knuckles, that's a straight up weapon. Apparently some guy bought razor blades and iced tea and got arrested for it. I know activists have disavowed that guy. They say they don't know who he is and they think he's actually in opposition to them. he might just be a crazy guy who went to a store and bought this in protest. The point is, you want to ask me why the police are there? Because last year people were beating each other in the streets and somebody died. Clearly, one side is more at fault than the other in terms of the violence we saw. It was the right. I shouldn't even say the right, because that's not fair to conservatives. It was the white nationalists. One of these guys ran people over, and he killed somebody. That's messed up. So the police are obviously going to come out and oppose this, set up checkpoints, and seize your weapons. But I think this is an interesting message. This is the Hill. This is mainstream reporting. Trump once said there was very fine people in Charlottesville. Well, he was wrong. Of course, nothing's absolute. But for the most part, I don't think the people who went down to Charlottesville were very fine people at all. It was just chaos. It was violence, and people were getting hurt. So whatever Trump's trying to insinuate, I think he had no idea what actually happened. I don't think he realized that it was literally, like, I think one guy had a Nazi flag, but you had a lot of this imagery, this Nazi imagery. People were chanting stuff about Jews, the 14 words. I think you all know what kind of event that was, but I don't think Donald Trump did. I would bet that he assumed it was something more like Berkeley, something more like, Ben Shapiro trying to speak, and not realizing he was saying there were very fine people down. I didn't go to Charlottesville. I don't go to this one because I don't go to white nationalist events. I don't go to alt-right events. I don't do it. With Patriot Prayer, that's about as far towards the fringe as I think I would go. I'm not saying that they are fringe, but they're I equate Patriot Prayer and the Proud Boys as far right as Bernie Sanders is left, right? So they're on the edge of what we would call left or right, and then beyond that you start getting into the wackaloons. So if a bunch of Trump supporter frat boy kind of dudes come out and they put on an event, I'll consider going. Because I don't even go to all of them. I went to Portland just because of how intense things had gotten between Antifa and the Proud Boys. Charlottesville is straight up something I just wouldn't go to. So when I look at these events, yeah, I don't think you can call it very fine people. But, anyway, the point I'm trying to make is they're trying to play it off like it was just the right. Well, here we have a story that shows the people who had prohibited items seized coming in here, that was Antifa. The people who are fighting with the cops, Antifa. Anything that happens tonight in terms of protests. We already saw stuff yesterday. People apparently tried to do a de-arrest. That's where they knocked the cop to the ground and then tried pulling the guy away. It's Antifa. The fights that have broken out, there's no conservatives here. And this is so obvious because most protests we've seen over the past several decades have been the left fighting with police. I mean, look at Occupy Wall Street. There wasn't a conservative, the Tea Party sat down and waved little American flags. And then Occupy Wall Street happens and it's actual bouts with police. If there's no target for the left, no conservatives, no white supremacists, no nationalists, whatever, they fight the police. It's so weird to me that the narrative doesn't focus on this, and it's so heavily centered on what the right is doing. They call Patriot Prayer and the Proud Boys violent, but they're a relatively new phenomenon. The right hasn't really protested. It's seriously only the past couple of years they've come out, and I believe it's in response to the violence we saw at the Trump rallies. So, you know what? Here you go. I don't know what's going to happen tonight in Charlottesville. By the time this video is up, maybe all hell breaks loose. Who knows? But there you go. There's cops there. Things were really violent. Here, look, I'll show this story. Police criticized for slow response to violent demonstrations in Charlottesville. Well, they're not going to make the same mistake twice. So now they're out in force, and people are still complaining about it. What are you going to do? Anyway, that's it for today. Keep an eye on this story. It's all happening today. I'm shooting this, a couple hours before it's going up. I've got a few more stories in just a few minutes, so hang out, and they'll be up in just a few minutes.